My name is Randy. I'm 47 years old. And for the past 15 years, I've been managing client relations at Bremail Bowworks, a role I poured myself into with loyalty, dedication, and a stubborn pride in the relationships I built and the team I nurtured. So when the new director, Jessica, stood in front of my entire team and said what she said, I just nodded, kept my hand steady on the polished conference table, and quietly responded, "I hope the client presentation goes well on Friday." The room fell silent. So silent I could hear the hum of the overhead lights, and I felt the weight of every eye drop toward the table instead of me. Jessica's eyes narrowed, sharp and assessing, and though she was only 32, armed with an MBA from some fancy program and brought in just 3 months ago to modernize operations, she had the air of someone who thought she already understood everything. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice clipped. I smiled, a calm I didn't quite feel spreading across my face, and said, "You'll figure it out." Then I stood, walked back to my office, and began packing 23 years of work into 2 worn cardboard boxes. Photos of product launches where I'd fought tooth and nail to deliver on promises. Awards from clients who trusted me more than the company name itself. And a chipped mug from my daughter that read, "World's Best Dad," which, in that moment, felt like the only award that mattered. Jessica hovered in my doorway like a shadow, words forming and dissolving on her lips until she finally managed, "Randy," about the Hollowgate account. But I cut her off, sealing the first box with a strip of tape that sounded like finality itself. Not my problem anymore. She retreated after that. My team came by one at a time, each visit brief and heavy with things unsaid. Quiet handshakes, promises to keep in touch, eyes that couldn't quite meet mine. Beth, my senior analyst, lingered longest, her voice trembling when she whispered, "This is wrong." I forced a small smile and said, "It's business." But we both knew that was a lie, because what Jessica had done wasn't just business. It was calculated. I'd seen it coming from the start. The meeting scheduled without me, the questions lobbed at me in front of clients, the subtle rewrites of my decisions. Last week, she told upper management my approach was too old school, that I was holding the company back. What she didn't know was that I'd been keeping records, meticulous notes of every slight, every attempt to edge me out, every conversation that showed me where things were heading. In this line of work, planning for the worst isn't paranoia. It's survival. When I loaded those boxes into my truck and drove home, Helen was waiting, coffee in hand and an expression that told me she already knew. "How bad?" she asked gently. "Could be worse," I said, though we both understood the ache behind the words. Sitting there in our kitchen, staring at my life compressed into boxes, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not sorrow, not even anger, but sharper edge, a clarity. Jessica thought she'd won, but she had no idea she'd just set herself up for failure. On Friday morning, when Hollowgate Systems called asking for me by name, she discovered that a presentation isn't just slides and buzzwords. It's trust history and a depth of knowledge she never bothered to understand. I'd started at Bremail fresh out of college, when it was little more than a scrappy company, with dreams bigger than its budget. The founder, old William Bremail, had taken a chance on me when no one else would, and I repaid that faith with sweat late nights and a relentless drive to learn everything. The science, the regulations, the psychology of clients who needed not just answers but reassurance. By 30, I was running client relations. By 35, I was a guy you called when the stakes were high and failure wasn't an option. Through the recession of 2008, when competitors folded, I kept Bremail afloat because clients trusted me personally, not just a logo on our letterhead. Helen carried the weight of our family. While I built something that mattered, while I raised a team that became a second family of sorts. But everything shifted when William retired 2 years ago, and his son Marcus took the reins. Marcus saw people as line items, not lifelines, and filled the halls with consultants who spoke in buzzwords and promises of optimization. Jessica was one of them. Charming Marcus with her jargon and spreadsheets, but from day one she was a wrecking ball. She interrupted client meetings with irrelevant suggestions, reorganized my department without understanding how it functioned, and worst of all, started calling my clients directly under guise of satisfaction assessments. 3 weeks ago, I caught her on the phone with corporate, saying, "Randy's methods are outdated. The clients like him, but they need fresh thinking." I can deliver the same results with half the overhead. Half the overhead meant cutting Beth, who had bled herself dry learning every nuance of the Hollowgate account, and Tom, who had taught himself Mandarin just to connect better with our Shanghai partners. I should have called her out then, but instead I doubled down on the work, because the Hollowgate pitch wasn't just another meeting. It was the biggest contract of the year, $30 million on the line, and I'd spent months building it from the ground up. Jessica thought it was just slides, but she didn't know the CTO hated formality or that the procurement director respected only precise, technical communication. She had no idea of the layers beneath the presentation, the relationships, the years of trust. She fired me to look decisive, but what she'd really done was set herself up to fail. That Thursday night, I couldn't sleep, not out of worry, but anticipation. Helen found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m, coffee beside my laptop. "You're planning something," she said knowingly. I shook my head, just thinking. She sat across from me, quiet, because after 22 years together, she knew when to push and when to wait, and this was a waiting moment. Jessica called. I finally admitted 3 voicemails. Helen raised an eyebrow. And she wants details about the Hollowgate presentation. Helen smiled faintly, because she'd lived through all the late nights and weekend calls, knew exactly how much of myself I'd poured into those clients. "What did you tell her?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, almost savoring the word. "I'm not her employee anymore." And that was when it hit me fully. Jessica hadn't just fired me. She'd severed 15 years of institutional memory, client nuances, technical specifications, trust that could never be captured in a report or passed along in a meeting. She thought she'd cleared dead weight, but what she'd really done was cut out the very heart that kept Bremail alive. Do you want me to keep expanding this into what happens after Friday, when Hollowgate calls and Jessica faces a fallout? Or should I keep the script ending right where it currently leaves off? The Hollowgate account was never just about a presentation. It was about trust forged over countless small interactions, like remembering that their lead engineer preferred detailed technical drawings over simplified flowcharts, or knowing that their COO always weighed implementation timelines more heavily than cost savings. Jessica thought she could walk in with a standard pitch deck, flash a polished smile, and charm her way into securing $30 million worth of business. But she had no idea that Hollowgate's team would be expecting the deep technical breakdown I had personally promised them, a breakdown that existed only in my head and in a notebook they would never be able to find. When I opened my laptop and glanced at the calendar, I saw Hollowgate scheduled for 10 a.m. Friday, and I knew that by 11 o'clock, Jessica would be in Marcus's office scrambling to explain why our biggest client of the year had walked out after just 20 minutes. My phone buzzed with a message from Beth. "Jessica's been in your office all day looking for files. She seems panicked." I typed back, "Files are on the server. She has access to everything." That was true. She could dig through contracts, client profiles, and generic templates. But what she didn't have was the context, the unspoken human element that transformed sterile data into meaningful relationships. I poured another cup of coffee, opened a blank document, and began typing a resignation letter, the formal kind I probably should have submitted weeks earlier when I first recognized her tactics. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I deleted the draft entirely. Why make it easy for her? Instead, I opened my personal email and reached out to contact from other biotech firms, people who had been courting me for years, waiting for the day I'd finally be free. By sunrise, I had 3 interview requests and even 1 firm job offer. Helen came downstairs at 6, found me still at the kitchen table, but already dressed for the day. "Going somewhere?" she asked. "Coffee shop downtown. Good Wi-Fi. Quiet enough for calls." She leaned down, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Give them hell." I smiled faintly, because I had no intention of giving anyone hell. Jessica was already doing that to herself. Friday morning at 9:47, I was seated in Brewster's coffee house, a steaming mug at my side, when my phone lit up with Jessica's name. I let it ring out. She called again, and again. By 10:15, she called 7 times. At 10:23, Beth's voice came through the line, urgent and low. "Randy, where are you? Hollowgate's here, and Jessica's falling apart. She can't find the technical specifications they're demanding." I stir my coffee calmly and said, "They're in the system." She says they're not. She's been searching all night. Then tell her to look under Hollowgate Systems, subsection technical requirements. Silence stretched on the other end. Then Beth whispered, "Randy," she says, "a folder is empty. Just basic contacts." I almost laughed. That's because the specs were never digitized. They're my notebook, the blue one that sat on my desk for years, the one I took home yesterday. Her breath caught. "They're asking for you specifically. The CTO wants to discuss the sensor calibration protocols you developed." I sighed. Wish I could help. At 10:45, Marcus himself called, his voice tight. "Randy, I need you to come in. There's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I replied evenly. "I was terminated yesterday. Effective immediately, I believe Jessica said." He faltered. "Look, we can work this out." Maybe she was hasty. Maybe she was. But I'm not your employee anymore, Marcus. I can't legally represent Bree-Mail in client meetings. Desperation crept into his tone. "Then name your rate." "I'm not available," I said simply, because at 2 p.m. I had a phone interview with Driftshade Limited, whose VP of Business Development had called personally after reviewing my resume that morning. By 11:30, Beth's text confirmed what I already knew. Hollowgate had walked out. They gave Jessica 20 minutes to deliver the documentation and, when she failed, politely excused themselves with a promise to reassess their options. At noon, Jessica called again, her voice frayed. "Randy, you have to help me. This is sabotage." "No," I said softly. "This is consequences." "I can report you for corporate sabotage, withholding information," she snapped. "What information?" "All company files are on the server. My notebooks, they're personal. I bought them, filled them, owned them. You terminated me without cause, without notice. That ended any claim to my cooperation." She hung up, and 10 minutes later security called, demanding the return of company property. I told them to check my contract, where it was clearly stated that personal notebooks remain mine. At 1:30, Helen rang me, laughing. "Casey just texted. Jessica posted on LinkedIn about exciting new opportunities at Bree-Mail. She's trying to spin this as restructuring." "How's that going?" I asked. "Not great. 3 of your former clients are already commenting, asking where you went." By 3 o'clock, after a very promising interview with Driftshade, I had my answer to Jessica's accusation. This wasn't sabotage. Sabotage implied deliberate destruction. I hadn't lifted a finger against them. I had simply carried my knowledge with me when they shoved me out the door. Jessica's refusal to learn how the department functioned, her arrogance in firing the only person who understood the intricacies of their most critical accounts. That was her choice. I had spent 15 years building something resilient and valuable. She had spent 15 minutes tearing it apart. Now she was discovering what that knowledge was worth. My phone buzzed with another message from Beth. Hollowgate called. They want to know if you're available for a freelance consultation. They're furious with Bramali's lack of preparation. I typed back, "Tell them I'm not available, but you might suggest Driftshade Limited for their biotech needs." Because sometimes the best revenge isn't retaliation. It's stepping aside and letting people be consumed by the mess they made. And on Saturday morning, when Tom from the Shanghai team called with something he needed to tell me, I realized the fallout was only just beginning. He said quietly, "I probably should have told you weeks ago." I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the table, and told him I was listening. He explained that Jessica had been calling our international clients, not to build relationships, but to dig for information, asking about contract terms, renewal dates, and pricing structures, things she could have easily found in our internal files. As he spoke, the picture became sharper, darker. "What else?" I asked, though I already felt a knot forming in my stomach. He went on. She had asked him to send her copies of all his client correspondence, claiming it was for quality assurance review. When he reminded her that everything was already logged in the CRM system, she insisted she needed the originals. A cold weight settled inside me, dread mixing with anger. "Did you send them?" I asked. "No," he said, But Randy, I think she was building a case against you, trying to prove you were hiding information or mismanaging accounts. Suddenly, everything made sense. The probing questions about my methods, the sudden interest in how I handle clients. Jessica wasn't learning from me. She was trying to replace me, gathering documentation she could twist into her narrative. Tom hesitated before adding, "There's more." Yesterday, after the Hollowgate disaster, she called an emergency meeting and told everyone you deliberately withheld critical information to sabotage the company. Beth shut her down fast, pointing out that you'd offered to train her when she first arrived, and Jessica had declined, saying she preferred her own methods. I remember that moment clearly. 3 months ago, an entire weekend spent putting together training materials for Jessica, detailed client profiles, communication habits, technical requirements. She barely glanced at them before dismissing my approach as outdated and too time-consuming for modern business practices. "What's the mood in the office?" I asked. Tom sighed, tense. "Mark has called an all-hands meeting for Monday. Word is he's bringing in outside consultants to assess the client relations crisis." After he hung up, I sat there thinking about the implications. Jessica hadn't moved against me impulsively. She'd been laying the groundwork for weeks. The Hollowgate presentation was supposed to prove her competence and justify pushing me out, but instead, it had exposed how little she actually understood about the clients she thought she could manage. Just then my phone rang. Drift Shade Limited. Patricia Chun, no, Patricia Holloway, introduced herself. She wanted to schedule an in-person interview for Monday. Her team was impressed with my background and, frankly, concerned about Bermali's recent turmoil. "We're looking for someone who understands the importance of relationship-based business development," she said. After hanging up, I realized Jessica might have done me a favor. For years, I've been comfortable at Bremail. Steady salary, familiar rhythms, strong relationships, but I'd stopped growing. I was maintaining, not building. That afternoon, Helen found me in the garage, reorganizing tools I hadn't touched in months. "Productive day?" she teased. "Enlightening day," I answered, then told her about the interview with Driftshade, the 20% salary increase, the equity options. She smiled, though she noticed I wasn't entirely happy. "What's wrong?" she asked. I put down the wrench in my hand. "I keep thinking about my team, Beth, Tom, the others. They're good people caught in Jessica's mess." Helen laid a hand on my arm. "You can't save everyone, Randy. You can only control what you do next." She was right. Jessica had made her choices, and now she'd live with them. Mine were still in front of me. Monday morning, I put on my best suit and drove downtown to Drift Shade's headquarters. The interview went smoothly, better than I expected. By noon, I had a formal offer. Senior Director of Client Relations, a 25% raise, full benefits, a signing bonus big enough to cover Casey's college tuition for 2 years. I accepted immediately. Walking out into the crisp Kansas City air, I felt lighter than I had in months. It wasn't just the money, it was the possibilities, the sense of forward motion. Drift Shade was expanding rapidly, landing contracts with pharmaceutical companies and research universities. They needed someone who understood how to build lasting relationships in a competitive field. Someone exactly like me. Not long after, Beth texted me. Bremail stock down 3%. The Hollowgate disaster already spreading. In biotech, reputation traveled fast. One major failure could unravel years of trust. By Tuesday, the Kansas City Business Journal reported that Hollowgate Systems had chosen Drift Shade for their biosensor project, the very $30 million contract I'd spent 8 months nurturing. Wednesday, Tom called. "Marcus fired Jessica yesterday, effective immediately." Relief filled his voice. "How's the team handling it?" I asked. "Mostly relieved," he said, "though now there's talk of bringing in another consultant to review operations." I felt a pang of sympathy for my old colleagues. They'd survived Jessica, but restructuring was like a virus. It spread, and it was hard to stop. "Tom," I asked after a pause, "are you happy there?" Silence, then, "Not really." "Why?" I told him about Drift Shade's expansion, how they needed someone with his international expertise. By Thursday, Patricia was calling again, this time with an even bigger proposition, a new pharmaceutical consulting division. "We'd need someone to head it up," she said. I immediately thought of Beth. Brilliant, overlooked, frustrated. I told Patricia I might know someone. That Friday, I met Beth at Brewster's Coffee House, the same place where I'd once sat watching Jessica's scheme collapse. Now, the tables had turned. "Randy, I can't believe what you're offering," she whispered. "Believe it," I said. "Drift Shade wants you to lead their pharmaceutical consulting division. Full autonomy, competitive pay, the chance to build something meaningful." She hesitated, then admitted Marcus had just offered her my old position. I leaned forward. Bree Mail will recover, slowly maybe, but Drift Shade is moving forward. "Do you want to fix something broken or build something new?" She smiled for the first time in months. "When do I start?" By the end of the week, Drift Shade had welcomed 3 former Bree Mail employees. Not through poaching, but through opportunity. Jessica had taught us all a lesson, the difference between managing people and truly leading them. Now we had the chance to do it right. 3 months later, I was in a conference room at Drift Shade's expanded offices, reviewing quarterly results with Patricia and the executive team. The numbers were extraordinary. Pharmaceutical consulting up 200%, international contracts up 150%, client satisfaction at record highs. Beth reported regulatory approvals that impressed clients. Tom joined by video from Shanghai to confirm new international markets. And Patricia praised us for exceeding every projection. Later that week, I received an email from Marcus. He wanted to meet. At Brewster's, he looked older, worn down. "Randy, I owe you an apology. I made a mistake with Jessica, a big one." He admitted Bree Mail was barely surviving. Clients lost, layoffs, plummeting stock. "Would you come back?" he asked desperately, offering power, authority, even double my salary. I shook my head. "It's not about money. It's about trust. You believed relationships didn't matter. You were wrong, and the damage is done." He left without finishing his coffee, and as I watched him go, I felt something unexpected. Pity. 6 months after my termination, Drift Shade announced a major acquisition, cementing us as the Midwest's largest independent consulting practice. I was promoted to Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. The business journals highlighted my departure from Bree Mail, linking it to their decline. Meanwhile, Jessica had taken position at a small startup in Denver, her profile full of buzzwords but empty of real accomplishments. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to prove relationships didn't matter, she destroyed the ones that kept Bree Mail alive. Beth and Tom thrived. Our team at Drift Shade was everything Jessica had pretended to want: efficient, results-driven, profitable, but with something she never understood: mutual respect and shared knowledge. Then one evening, Casey called from college. "Dad," she said excitedly, "my business professor used your story as a case study, the Bree Mail mistake." I laughed, remembering Helen's words. The best revenge really is living well. And she was right. As always, you can't save everyone. You can only choose what you do next. 6 months later, Marcus was forced to step down after more failed acquisitions and financial losses. Jessica's startup folded within 8 months, leaving her explaining resume gaps to doubtful employers. Her so-called transformation became a cautionary tale in business schools nationwide. And me, I didn't need revenge. Watching Bree Mail collapse under the weight of its own arrogance was proof enough that relationships, trust, and leadership matter more than any shiny new strategy ever could.